Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com. Good evening and welcome to Jenna Ellis tonight. So there is a lot going on in the nation with legal drama, and we're going to break it all down tonight, from TikTok suing the United States to Title IX and all things Trump world, from a Manhattan courthouse all the way down to Florida. So let's welcome in our legal eagles. Tonight's legal eagles are Mike Donnelly, who is an attorney and a law professor, and also we have joining us Ron Coleman, who is an attorney and a partner with the Dillon Law Group, and also the host of the Coleman Nation podcast. So, gentlemen, welcome, and let's start with all things Trump related. So, first, this coming from from CNBC. I'm sure the Washington Examiner also had a headline on it, but CNBC: Trump classified documents trial in Florida postponed indefinitely. A federal judge in Florida indefinitely postponed the criminal classified documents trial of former President Donald Trump. The trial on charges that Trump willfully retained classified national security records after leaving the White House and then hid them from federal authorities was scheduled to start May 20th. But the new ruling from U.S. District Court Judge Eileen Cannon vacates that date and sets a new slate of pretrial proceedings, the latest of which is set for hearing on July 22nd. Meanwhile, Stormy Daniels took the stand yesterday in Trump's Manhattan, New York City trial, and this was supposed to be over campaign finance, so I'm not really sure the relevance, and CNN isn't even sure the relevance either. This coming from a federal judge. Listen.
The material that came in was not relevant to this criminal case at all. And I think it shows that she was trying to get Trump. I actually thought there was a motive there. She said she hates him. She said she'd like to see him in prison. I think she was purposely throwing out this stuff to make sure the jurors were prejudiced, particularly the women jurors, but probably half of the men too, were really put off.
All right, Ron, let's start there. Stormy Daniels gets to testify, but no campaign finance experts. What do you make of the judge's calls there?
Well, Judge Sheindlin is a real straight shooter. I've been in front of her many times. You can just tell from the way she laid that out. She tells it like it is. She is not a political judge. She's a judge's judge, and she's retired. She nailed it. People are beginning to see what's going on. And look, there's always been a certain amount of tension between federal judges and state court judges, especially in New York, where everyone thinks they're just the greatest thing in the world by virtue of wearing a robe in that state. But the quality and the merits of what we're seeing in Manhattan criminal court is an absolute dumpster fire. And asking an experienced federal judge who has been influential on the development of the law for a fair take on it, got to give her all the credit in the world. She nailed it.
Yeah, and this shows, I think, just how biased the New York judge actually is. Instead of being a straight shooter like this former federal judge, he's making all kinds of decisions that appear to be politically biased. So what do you make of this, Mike, in terms of, the fairness of due process that Trump clearly isn't getting in the Manhattan case?
Well, it's not just the Manhattan case, Jenna. It's all four cases. What we are seeing is a weaponization and politicization of the American justice system. I think people know that's what's going on. Would Donald Trump be being prosecuted if he wasn't running for president? I mean, maybe they bring the January 6th case. Maybe they, I don't know. But this is a travesty, in my opinion. The president was impeached twice, and now he's got 4 criminal trials. It's never happened in American history. Why is this happening? This is what I want to challenge people to grapple with. Why is this happening? We forget that. We see there's all this stuff going on, and we get lost in the soap opera like drama of what's going on. This judge is saying this, and that judge is saying that. we have a republic here that is in danger of very serious danger. Very serious danger. And I think Justice Kavanaugh got it right when he questioned in the presidential immunity case. He's like, I fear for the presidency if this stuff is going to continue to happen. How can we have a functioning republic if presidents are going to face this kind of stuff during and after office?
Yeah, really well said, because this isn't just about Trump himself, even though the Democrats would like to make it about Trump. This is about the greater issues of our constitutional protections, due process, and about the office of the president that eventually, whether Trump wins this time or not, will be occupied by other people besides Donald Trump. And so the National Review, Ron, also had a headline today talking about how the Manhattan prosecutors are clearly just wanting to take this to a conviction so that Joe Biden can use that term convicted felon on the campaign trail. I think they're absolutely right, but they're getting a straight shooter in Florida, turning to the Mar-a-Lago documents case with Judge Eileen Cannon that isn't putting up with this. She's not a political judge. And so, this is frustrating, I think, the DOJ that they're not going to get this trial moving forward before the November election. But, the DOJ is prosecuting Trump for this when they didn't go after Biden or Mike Pence even for having classified documents.
There are a couple of things. First of all, I think there's a dawning realization that this gigantic golden ring of being able to call Trump convicted is going to change precisely 0 votes. No votes. No one is changing sides on the issue of what's going on with Donald Trump at this point. If anything, it's going to change them in the direction of Donald Trump. People who don't like him, but otherwise might be more conservative than a Biden voter, are moving into the Trump column. And this is not just wishful thinking. This has been demonstrated. They're moving into the Trump column because they see that he is being victimized by the system. What's going on in Florida? Well, of course, you can imagine that on the mirror image version of this discussion all over MSNBC and the Left Wing podcast, they're saying, well, Judge Cannon, she owes her job to Trump, which is kind of silly. She has her job. There's nothing Trump can do for her now. But she's being favorable to Trump, and she's making things difficult for this Justice Department. Meanwhile, stuff is coming out in the filings that she has removed from seal that are devastating to the Justice Department on many, many levels, not only in the Florida case.
Yeah, well, we could talk about this for so much longer, but we'll be back with another topic with our Legal Eagles right after this. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. We're back with our Legal Eagles, Mike Donnelly and Ron Coleman, and let's discuss TikTok. So this headline coming from NBC. News: TikTok sues the US government, saying potential ban violates the First Amendment. The company argues that invoking national security concerns isn't a sufficient reason to restrict free speech. I mean, of course, China would say that, right? But TikTok is suing the US government to stop enforcement of a bill passed last month that seeks to force the app's Chinese owner to sell the app or have it banned. So, Mike, is this really a free speech issue? I mean, I think this is a little bit ironic that China is trying to use our own constitution against us. What do you make of this?
Well, I lived in China. I actually speak Chinese a little bit, so I have a understanding of Chinese history and strategy. China is a very strategic adversary. We should never underestimate China. And of course, they would use every and all avenues of approach that they can. So what would you expect? Is this regulation of speech or infringement of speech, or is this regulation of commerce? I mean, Congress has the authority to regulate commerce among the several states and the Indian tribes and with foreign nations. So is this about regulating commerce, a company that is coming from outside the United States? It's a California corporation, but it does have ownership outside the United States. I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing. So this is a tough one to balance. I don't think this is regulating free speech, although that's how TikTok does want to characterize it. And I will point to paragraph 29 in the lawsuit, which I found very telling as I was reading through the lawsuit, where TikTok admitted that the Chinese government will, open quote, not allow, close quote, divestment of the, quote, recommendation engine, close quote. So right there, TikTok is admitting that it cannot comply with what Congress wants it to comply with because the Chinese government will not allow it to. Admission against interest, possibly, Ron? What do you think?
Yeah, Ron?
Well, it is a judicial admission, but I'm not sure how damaging of a one it is. I've always had a big problem with this legislation. I think you're 100% right that the Chinese government is very canny. It knows what it's doing, and it knows and its goals are highly subversive. And TikTok is a tool of subversion. I do think that the Commerce Clause is being asked to do it's been asked to do a hell of a lot for 50 years. Okay, we know that. That's a problem. But what it's being asked to do here is problematic. This is a consumer application. It's owned by a company in which a state has an interest. Lots and lots of companies in the world, including most national airlines, many, many other technology companies, have government ownership in them. It's a bad precedent to say that we're going to take from consumers the ability to use applications or products, goods, services, whatever it is, based on disagreements with, and when I say disagreements, I don't mean to understate them. These are fundamental strategic threats to our well-being. But we need to fix our culture. And a world in which using TikTok would become, or downloading TikTok, or tuning in TikTok would be an underground experience. That strikes me as very un-American.
Well, I've never seen this as genuinely a free speech issue in terms of the legislation, because it's not about the content that is posted on TikTok that the US government has a problem with. It's the platform itself and the data privacy issues. And the issue, I think, Mike Donnelly, is whether or not the US government basically can forbid its own citizens to give over their information to a foreign government under the auspices of using the platform for whatever purposes they want, as a consumer. I mean, I'm sure that China has a lot of information, but if we're willingly giving it as citizens, should our government be able to tell us that we can't in exchange for a product or service like TikTok? I mean, I don't use TikTok, but shouldn't I as an American have the right to do that?
Well, I don't use TikTok. I don't have an account on TikTok, although I had a good experience with TikTok a few years ago when I was representing or helping a homeschool family in New Hampshire who was being persecuted by New Hampshire Department of Social Services. And TikTok came to the rescue when a person was talking about what was happening in their case. So I think, whether it's TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, we want to have a very broad acceptance of lots of platforms where people can communicate and express their opinion. So I think that's very important. This is going to come down to, is this commerce? Does Congress have the right to do this, or the authority, rather, to regulate companies, a single company in this case, which I do find a little bit troubling also, that they're singling out this one company. I would note that Florida has actually passed legislation in its state to prohibit foreign ownership of educational institutions in that state. So this is something we're grappling with, and we may be at the early stages of it. Free the authority of Congress to regulate commerce, and is this a speech issue? I mean, these are very interesting questions that we're going to have the opportunity to talk about and really understand and think through. I don't think this is an easy one.
Yeah, and I would agree with you on that because there are a clash of interests and a clash of rights here, and so as much as we could say, well, China shouldn't even have standing to sue, in some sense because it's a foreign adversary, and certainly has been put on that list by Congress. Ron, where do you see the main clash between rights here, and what ultimately likely the Supreme Court is going to have to grapple with?
I think we identified it. I agree with everyone here. This is not strictly speaking a free speech issue, but I do think there's a real question whether this is at all within Congress's jurisdiction to legislate. The idea that we're protecting citizen data here, why all of a sudden is that an interest? For years, Google and Facebook have been mining every piece of data out of our lives and selling it to the highest bidder or using it for their own profitability. The fact that now China is involved, and if you think China hasn't already been involved, you're out of your mind. So I think this is a really cool law school case.
Yeah, actually, and we're at less than a minute before the end here. But Mike, if you can say this or in a summation of like 30 seconds, where should the parameters of the Commerce Clause be?
Well, Congress has a lot of authority under the Commerce Clause. The Supreme Court has allowed Congress to do a lot, and this may test some of the limits of that, but the courts have been very open to Congress regulating broadly in the area of commerce. So I think Congress has a good shot here at upholding, but I could see how the court could see otherwise.
Yeah, well, as Ron said, very fascinating law school hypothetical. We'll see how the Supreme Court ultimately deals with it, likely. We'll be right back with more with our Legal Eagle panel. Well, friends, you might have heard that Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of their box stores or shopping channels the way that they used to. They've been part of this cancel culture, so they want to pass along the savings directly to you by having a $25 extravaganza. I love that word, extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just a one-product company. With the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products, some you may not even know about. To get the word out, I want to invite my listeners to check out their $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use MyPillows are just $25. MyPillow sandals, also awesome, only $25. Their 6-pack towel sets are $25. And brand new 4-pack dish towels, you guessed it, just $25. For the first time ever, the premium MyPillows with the all-new Giza fabric, just $25. And orders over $75 will receive free shipping, too. This amazing offer won't last long. Go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Jenna, or call 800-564-8475 today. That's 800-564-8475, or go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Jenna. And we're back with our Legal Eagles, Mike Donnelly and Ron Coleman. I told you all that we had a lot to discuss legally. So this next topic is about Title IX, and this coming from the Alliance Defending Freedom. This is what they posted on X. Breaking, we filed a lawsuit with Attorney General Ashley Moody out of Florida, by the way, against the Biden administration's latest attempt to redefine sex under federal healthcare law. Biden's new HHS rule would mandate that doctors and insurance companies provide harmful, quote-unquote, gender transition procedures or face steep penalties. The new rule also limits the state's ability to set standards of care for health professionals. The state of Florida and our attorney sued the Biden admin the day the rule was published to challenge this unlawful overreach. So, Ron, is this just a classic, straightforward case of federalism, or where are we going?
the problem is with Bostock. And the problem is with the existence of Title IX. I mean, we have these anti-discrimination laws. You can call them problems, you can call them great things, and you can say that whatever it is, we have been brought to this point by the United States Supreme Court, which has allowed this law to be so very intrusive in American life, while at the same time ruling in Bostock that the use of the word sex includes so-called transgender persons. And it's a completely logical extension of everything the Biden administration has been about, which has been destroying every possible institution and distinction that our culture is built on. It's no surprise here.
Yeah. So, Mike, to Ron's point, I mean, is this potentially an opportunity for the court to reverse itself, or at least narrow the very troubling Bostock opinion with that read into the 1964 Civil Rights Act of sex, meaning sexual orientation, gender identity, all of that was ridiculous, and that we all thought, what is Justice Gorsuch doing writing that opinion?
I think Justice Gorsuch will have that opportunity, if he wants to avail himself of it, to fix if he feels it needs to be fixed. I would note that this is a federalism issue, Jenna. I think Title IX is a spending program. Spending in the sense that if an institution is receiving federal funds, it has to comply with the Title IX anti-discrimination. And so, one thing I wonder if the states are thinking about is just don't take the money. If the states stop taking federal money, they won't have to put up with federal definitions of sex or gender or comply with Title IX regulations. Now, I understand that's not an easy thing to say no to millions, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars. And of course, the institutions themselves in the states, the money coming through them, it affects the institutions. So that's a problem with the regulation. I'd also note that it's interesting. We've talked about the Loper Bright relentless cases that potentially could result in the overruling of or strict limiting of the Chevron doctrine. And I think that could come into play here if the court does overturn Chevron. I could see people amending their complaints and saying, hey, we need to look at this in light of Chevron because this is a regulatory interpretation issue. And that would also potentially go back up to the Supreme Court and give them the opportunity to clarify or, cabin the Bostock decision if they want to.
Well, and that's an interesting clash, I think, in the ideology of Justice Gorsuch specifically, because he is no fan, Ron, of the administrative state. And I think has been very clear in some of his previous holdings, especially when he was on the 10th Circuit, that he would like to narrow the administrative state, but he was in favor of Bostock. So, where do we see this potentially going? And maybe, as Mike says, this is an opportunity for someone like the free state of Florida to say, hey, we want the federal government to stay out, even if that means your federal dollars.
Well, Bostock did leave the door open for cases to go in the direction that the Biden administration has wanted it to. And courts have taken the opportunity to walk through that door. They always will. But on the other hand, there's nothing in Bostock that really requires these rules, and it would be very simple and very Robertsian for them to say, we're not going to retreat from Bostock. But no, this was not, these rules go further than Title IX authorizes them to do.
Robertsian. I think we've just coined a new phrase for future, law school reviews. Yeah, that's great. But but speaking of federal dollars and strings attached, Mike, and you and I go way back in talking about how the federal government, through its use of funding, has all of these strings attached to the state, and that has eroded the principles of federalism. When we're talking about this type of funding, I mean, this obviously comes with strings attached, and yet where we have an opportunity, like Congress currently does, to say, hey, we're giving a lot of federal money to, for example, universities like Columbia and others that are allowing these encampments and these violent pro-terrorist student groups and other outside agitators. Why isn't Congress doing anything specifically to say, hey, this funding now does need to come with strings attached, or we're going to defund you, Columbia, UCLA, et cetera?
Well, that's a fair question, Jenna, but I will still come back to my roots, which is I don't want the federal government telling the states what to do in that level of detail. I'd love it if the Supreme Court would say, you know what, Congress, you don't get to condition things on your money. Okay? The Constitution doesn't allow it. You want to send the states money, you take it from one pocket, you hand it to the other. You don't get to tell them everything, and you can't overcome state law with that. If the states want to define sex in one way, they should be able to do that. If California wants to just let people check X on their birth certificate, okay, full faith and credit, that's a problem. But we have gone so far in the direction of the federal government getting into every single little nook and cranny of our lives, we've got to push back. And so I say to the Supreme Court, take this opportunity.
Yeah, Ron, closing thoughts in just the last about minute and a half we have here.
Michael's 100% right. It is an addiction. It's an addiction in domestic policy. It's an addiction in foreign policy. Money corrupts, and absolutely huge amounts of money corrupt absolutely. That's what we've got here. I don't doubt that the Biden administration would proceed on a different track to get to the same place without the money. They would make these claims under the Civil Rights Act. Under the present composition of the court, I don't think they would succeed here. But this is the big problem, and it's a culture war, and it's just not going away.
Yeah, well, this is why it's so fascinating to, come back to the roots in the Constitution, understanding exactly what our founders intended by federalism, by things like the Commerce Clause. And this is why this deeper analysis with great constitutional minds like yours is always appreciated. So Legal Eagle panel, Mike Donnelly, Ron Coleman, thanks so much. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis tonight to look at woke Jesus and another interesting controversy that probably won't go up to the Supreme Court. We'll be right back. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce, 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. Well, in the most hilarious controversy of the week, which is very on brand for the Babylon Bee, concerned a video where they were satirizing what woke Jesus would have taught if Jesus was actually woke. And of course, the leftists had their qualms with this because obviously the people who don't believe in God are very certain that they can tell us exactly what he would be appalled by. So this is just a portion of what I think is an amazingly well done, hilarious video titled Woke Jesus.
If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn it off with the other also. Unless they're a Republican. Then you can feel free to punch them in the face. Let the children come unto me, and do not hinder them, unless they might be born into poverty, or they might be an inconvenience to your party lifestyle. In that case, feel free to murder them in the womb. Haven't you read that in the beginning, God created them male and female, and genderqueer, femboy, trans man, trans woman, two-spirit? You have heard that it was said, hate your enemies. But I say to you, this is correct. And here's a handy little chart to help you understand who your enemy is, based on Marxist intersectionality theory.
As the Lord was setting out on a journey, a certain young man approached him.
Oh, my Lord, what must I do to be saved?
Be less white.
But the man went away sad, for he was very white.
Joining me now is Seth Dillon, who is the CEO of the Babylon Bee, or the Bee Chief, as we lovingly refer to him. So, Seth, how dare you satirize Jesus and show the left, hold up a mirror, and say, this is what you're actually suggesting that Jesus taught during his earthly ministry? I mean, how dare you?
Well, I think the main objection, I don't know, I saw a lot of objections. There were a lot of complaints in the comments on this. A lot of people thought it was funny, by the way. There were a lot who thought it was funny. But I think the main objection is that there's a confusion that happens whenever you put words in Jesus' mouth or quote the Bible differently than what it actually says in order to make a point, in order to mock something that's mockable. They get really confused and they don't understand how satire works, and they try to suggest that you're mocking Jesus himself or that you're mocking the Bible. And that's not what we're doing here. What we're doing is we are mocking the people who make a mockery of Jesus by suggesting that he would be advancing these secular progressive, radically leftist teachings as if they were, core Christian Orthodox doctrine.
Right. And that was very clear to anyone who actually has a brain and who looked at this video and understands, the finesse that is satire. Clearly, what this video is doing is displaying how the left views wrongly and falsely the teachings of Jesus, and how they've manipulated this into thinking that Jesus was a socialist, or that he's pro-humanitarian, or that he would have been this intersectionality cultural Marxist. And so for the people who did have a problem with this, I mean, what has been your ability to respond to this and to actually use their consternation to further prove your point?
Well, for the most part, we're ignoring the criticism. I think the joke stands on its own. I think people usually in cases like this, they're not actually failing to get the point. They're purposefully acting like they don't get the point so that they can be upset about something that doesn't really justify being upset about. So I don't know that it really warrants much of a response. I think the video is great. It's getting all the right people angry. I mean, it should bother people when you actually have these words coming from his mouth. You see, if you understood liberal, like some people think of Jesus as being a liberal in the sense that he's compassionate. Well, of course, Jesus was compassionate. But that of course, suggests that Republicans or conservatives are not. And really what it comes down to is in the political spectrum, there's different ways of thinking, well, how can we help people who are less fortunate? How can we alleviate suffering? And we have different answers to those problems. It's not as if one side or the other just doesn't care about those problems. And what this video does, I think, is just suggest some of the absurdity of these ideas in suggesting that they are somehow compatible with Christianity. I think a lot of these ideas on the radical left are very far removed from traditional Christianity, and it's easy to show that, and this does a great job of doing that.
Yeah, and one of the things that the Babylon Bee does so brilliantly with your satire is that you have these larger conversations that are based on very quippy, really funny, humorous headlines that get to the truth in ways that people can't just reject. I mean, they get the point, and that's the purpose of satire, isn't it?
Yeah, satire is meant to it's meant to speak, well, the way that we're using it, and this is how it's historically been used as a tool, is to speak truth to the culture, to confront bad ideas. I mean, that's really the purpose of satire. It's not just to make you laugh and entertain you. It's to deal with some of these things that are social cancers, that are bad for society, that have harmful effects, these ideas that, if taken seriously, will have catastrophic consequences. Satire is one of the most effective ways of rooting those out and exposing them and opening your eyes to them in ways that you wouldn't necessarily. It's in an unexpected way, So it's a vehicle for truth delivery. That's really what it is. And so I think that's one of the reasons why satire is among the most effective tools that you can use. And it's also one of the ones the tyrants go after first when they want to try to shut up whoever's speaking the truth and challenging their power.
Yeah, I mean, even back in the Middle Ages, the court jesters, couldn't make fun of the king or queen, and they were the petty tyrants, that were trying to put a kibosh on the humor. And you even now have some Republicans or people on the MAGA right, like Carrie Lake's War Room, that was really mad that the Babylon Bee had a really funny headline about her, and they labeled it as invalid satire, and that just
Yeah, I
sparked
love that you
this
brought that
great
up.
controversy. Yeah, over valid satire. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Well, so you raise a broader point here. Typically, what we think of when people are offended by Babylon Bee jokes, it's usually people on the left who are really upset because we targeted them, and it's in their humorless scolds, and they want to be kept in their safe spaces, and they don't want to be offended by anything, or they're offended on somebody else's behalf. That we saw that with Vivek Ramaswamy too. But with the Carrie Lake thing, yeah, it was interesting because you had a situation where people on the right were acting like the people on the left, where they had these, sacred cows, these untouchable things that you're not supposed to joke about. If you do joke about them, it's invalid satire, or it's, satire that's really just propaganda pretending to be comedy, but it's not really comedy. Our job as satirists, as humorists, is to hold everyone in power accountable, and even ourselves accountable. We joke about ourselves a lot. The Babylon
Mhm.
Bee is a Christian website. We make tons of jokes at the expense of the Christian church, evangelical Christian culture, some of the
Mhm.
things that we get wrong, some of the areas where we are employing double standards and being hypocrites, or being just foolish. And so this idea that your preferred candidate or your preferred party should be completely off the hook and should be protected from satire because you want them to get elected and not be challenged misses the broader point of what the purpose of satire is. It's that nobody, just like nobody's above the law. You hear people say that all the time. Hillary Clinton says that, which is kind of ironic when she says it. But just like nobody's above the law, nobody should be excluded from satirical commentary, because that's really how
Yeah.
you hold people in positions of power accountable.
Yeah, really well said. Well, Seth Dillon, always appreciate you dropping by. We'll be right back with more. Well, all of that controversy surrounding the Babylon Bee's parody of Woke Jesus was to promote actually a book called Woke Jesus. So, this is what the Babylon Bee tweeted under their parody video. It says, "Get your copy of Woke Jesus from Lucas Miles today and defend your faith against progressive ideology." So, Lucas Miles is the author of that book and a pastor, and he joins me now. So, Lucas, I think you got a lot of amplification on this book. I'm looking forward to reading it. And what is the thrust of the book explaining how progressives are taking the gospel message and distorting it?
Absolutely. First off, thanks, Jen, for having me on the program. And yeah, we've got a lot of traction, with this particular ad, and very thankful to Babylon Bee and their creativity to really be able to make that happen. This book is all about giving Christians hopefully a definitive work on the issues of wokeism, the history of it, how it got here, how it's infiltrated the church, and ultimately what we can do about it. I see so many pastors and Christians that they're not up on these issues. They don't know how to argue them. They don't know how to defend their faith against some of the, claims that Jesus was a socialist, or Jesus, would be trans affirming, or Jesus was a refugee. So therefore we have to allow open borders. And because they're not established in that, I think the church is losing ground and a lot of confusion setting in. So I wanted to give that definitive work to help people through these issues.
This is an amazing apologetics project, and I highly commend you for doing this, because I've seen over the last, especially 10 years or so, but probably even going back further than that, especially young people who say that they have a solid faith, but then they don't really apply the Bible and scriptural principles to things like policy. And so, for example, one of the things that I'm seeing that is probably addressed in your book on social media prolifically is saying that Jesus didn't address the issue of homosexuality anywhere in the New Testament. So, of course, he would affirm gay marriage. What is your response to that? And I'm sure you covered that in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually just did a social media video on this here recently. When you see the arguments against this, they all focus on a particular word in 1 Corinthians 6, where it is this word arsenio koite in the Greek. And so The interesting thing is that those that have more of that deconstructionist, progressive Christianity viewpoint, they will hone in on this definition. They'll pick it apart and they'll say this word is only talking about, those that are in this sort of oppressive position, that they're asserting some sort of, sexual dominance against somebody else. And that's the only thing it's condemning. Now, it's interesting when you actually start talking to them about that. They are right about the definition of that word to a degree. The problem is that the word right before it gives the other receptive side of a intimate relationship in a homosexual marriage or homosexual relationship of any kind, and it gives the receptive form of that. And so the passage actually condemns both what we might call the aggressive and the receptive position within this. And so by definition of the passage, it condemns both. Now, the way in which critical theorists approach these things, and look, these are sensitive topics, I understand it, but the whole nature of critical theory is all about kind of getting into the weeds of the definitions, creating that kind of confusion around a topic because they're so drilled down and they kind of miss the forest through the trees, sort of illustration there.
Yeah, and Lucas, this is one of the ways that critical theorists and cultural Marxists are trying to infiltrate churches to essentially neuter churches from standing firm on biblical values that ultimately affect conservative policy. Because what they want to do is harness the person of Jesus and say he would have been for refugees. He would have been for love is love and affirming everyone. And so how dare you, Christian, say that Jesus wouldn't have affirmed all of these cultural Marxist ideas? And so how can Christians stand firm and say, it doesn't matter, the names that you call us, what we're standing firm on is the truth and the accuracy of Scripture and also the historicity of what Jesus himself actually taught during his earthly ministry?
Yeah, look, there is so many attempts to create confusion around the scriptures and the data involved in kind of study of that. And I think that in some cases that there is a lot of ground that's been won by progressives. And it's frightening when you see kind of the biblical literacy that exists in our society today. But Scripture's clear on this. Church history is clear on this. Look, Christians, this is not the first time we've dealt with heresies. It's not the first time we've dealt, with contrary viewpoints. Truth always rise up. The Bible's clear. Jesus made, humanity male and female. He created us for marriage. That's the only, example that's given in Scripture. All other types of relationships are condemned. We can go through issue by issue and really sort these things through, which, of course, I do in the book, Woke Jesus. But it's important that Christians take the time to establish this. These are not political topics, and we have to get past that lie. To the pastors out there and to the Christian leaders out there that are saying, well, I just don't think the church should be talking about politics. These aren't political. These are first and foremost faith issues. They've been made political, but we have to reestablish what the church's view on these things, what Christ's view is on these things through the Scriptures, so that I believe the church can exist as the conscience to the state here on matters of moral authority.
Yeah, so well said. And, as Andrew Breitbart famously said, politics is downstream from culture, but I always add on to that, culture is downstream from worldview and values. And so if the church is not standing firm on values and affecting the culture around us, then it's no wonder when we get to politics and policy, then everyone is buying into this whole cultural Marxist notion that it's my truth versus your truth, and Christians need to be excised from the public square and policy, because how dare you thrust your religion and your faith on me, when that has been the status quo and the understanding that law is informed by moral truth and policy must reflect a moral absolute. But we've gotten so far away from that. So in just the last about minute and a half I have with you here, what is the most important topic with this book that you think is misunderstood in terms of the apologetic of actually utilizing faith and those values to inform a moral and upright society?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of topics I cover, from critical race theory to what might be called the quest for the historical Jesus, which is where a lot of deconstructionist work happens. We talk about, liberation theology, all these different things that are really hitting, I think, culture today. But I think ultimately the purpose of this book is to get to the end of it. And the end of it is the revelation of the biblical Christ. And what we see is that Jesus is the true intersectionality in our world. That's a term that's been, hijacked by the left. But Jesus is the intersection of a sinless God and a depraved humanity. And he came to that moment at the cross. He provided a method to eradicate all, injustice of the world. And he is faithful. He's reliable. He's trustworthy. He's good. He can be trusted. His word stands eternal. And I think when people see the true Christ, all these other false examples really fall by the wayside very, very quickly.
So well said, and amen to that. So Lucas Miles, and the book is Woke Jesus, and you can get that wherever books are sold, and of course from our friends at the Babylon Bee. So really appreciate it, and that's all the time we have for Jenna Ellis tonight. I'll see you tomorrow.